How many of you have seen the play Golda's Balcony or the movie Golda? So you know there's that moment. It is January 1948, and Golda Meyerson, before she became Golda Meir, is sent by the incipient Jewish state, the Yishuv, to go to America to raise funds. And she goes to Chicago, to the GA, the General Assembly. And she is tasked with raising $25 million. And she raises double that amount. She raises $50 million. And in Golda's Balcony, you hear her compelling pitch to American Jews, and it inspires them to give their money to the state of Israel. Make no mistake about it. This is our Golda moment. We are living in Golda time. This is our Golda moment. And Golda Meir was able to succeed because she knew three things. And the American Jewish community in 1948 knew three things that were urgent and true. And it inspired them to open their hearts and their wallets to support Israel. And all of those three things that were true in 1948, that Golda knew and that the Jews knew then, are true now, and we need to know them now. Here's the first thing that Golda knew, and that the people she spoke to just 3 years after the Holocaust knew, which is they knew what it looked like when Jews were slaughtered. They saw the slaughter of Jews. They saw the butchering of Jews in Europe. And it made them sick to their stomach, and it made them nauseous, and it made them angry, and it made them rageful, and it made them broken, and it made them heartbroken, and it made them grief-stricken, and it made them determined to fight back. We know that too. If you saw a prayer for the French Republic, which was at the Huntington, the narrator was talking about French anti-Semitism. And at the beginning of the second act, he talks about all the bad stuff that happened to French Jews 1,000 years ago. And he starts to describe it, and its atrocities, and its barbarism, and its savagery. And as you're in the Huntington listening to it, you're just getting very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. And then he stops and he says, I know, it's too dark. I know, it goes too far. I know, it's too much. But it happened, and then he mercifully stops talking about it. And he was talking about stuff that happened 1,000 years ago during the Crusades in medieval France. And the same stuff was happening last Shabbos. Last Shabbos. Simchas Torah. And everybody knows somebody. Lester Holt did a segment one night this week, and he ended it with the story of Ilan Troen, who lives 5 miles from here, teaches at Brandeis. And Ilan Troen brought a beautiful daughter into the world, and she was radiant and idealistic and noble and beautiful. And she found a husband who was radiant and idealistic and beautiful and noble. And she and her husband moved to the south of Israel. And they were going to build a better world, and they were going to build bridges of peace. And on Shabbos morning and on Simchas Torah morning, they were butchered, slaughtered in their own home before their teenage son. And here's one other thing that we know. Don't miss this. Underline this. Bold this. Put 4 exclamation marks around this. This murder didn't happen in land whose status is remotely controversial. It didn't happen in the West Bank. It didn't happen in Yehuda and Shomron, pick your noun. It wasn't controlled land. It wasn't occupied land. It wasn't 1967 land. The southern communities and villages near Gaza, like Sderot, they're indisputably Jewish communities. Unless you just happen to think that Jews don't deserve any land whatsoever in the state of Israel. In other words, the sin is not 1967. The sin is 1948. The sin is our very existence. The sin is any Jewish state. Jews living in the land of Israel were slaughtered because they were Jews living in the land of Israel, indisputably in the land of Israel. So Golda and her community in 48 saw the butchering of Jews, and we see it today. Point one. Point two, here's the other thing, the next thing that they knew. The hatred that made the Holocaust possible didn't end with the Holocaust. It wasn't like now with the Holocaust, oh, now we've kind of satiated our hatred of Jews. We're good now, we don't have any more hatred. No. Gave expression to it, and it continued to linger. And you all know this. You all know that 2.7 out of Poland's 3 million Jews perished in the crematoria. 1/10 of Polish Jews survived. And you know, when those Jews came back to Poland, they found unremitting hatred and hostility. They found the line, we wish Hitler would have finished the job. The hatred didn't end. And the hatred that made last Saturday's massacre possible did not end. It exists, and it is in our own shores. Here's a story that is bone-tingling. You remember Mikey Rosenberg, cute little Mikey, who used to sit here when he was a kid? So he's now a college freshman at Columbia, and Elias and Lorraine are there for freshman weekend at Columbia. And Elias shared this story in our Talmud podcast that was live streamed this morning at 8:30. The following story that Mikey calls him on Thursday, and he's very rattled. Very rattled. And he says that he and about 200 students were protesting Hamas and were protesting in favor of Israel. Now, you should think this is no-brainer territory. New York has a lot of Jews in it. Columbia has a big Jewish population. And they're protesting against Hamas, against barbarism, against medieval savagery. And yet, it was not a no-brainer. What happened was that 700 Palestinian sympathizers started moving towards these 200 Jewish students, and campus police were so concerned about their safety. They were meeting in the town square in Columbia at the basic campus. They had to be whisked away under the protection of police and taken to the Kraft building, where the door was locked, and they were guarded by police. And now, in the privacy of a closed building, instead of the openness of the campus, they could protest. And Mikey was rattled, understandably. And he asked the question, how could it be? Who walks with Hamas? Evidently, a lot of college kids walk with Hamas. That hatred isn't over, it's still here. That's what Golda's crowd knew, that's what we know. By the way, and the only answer to that, the best answer and the only answer to that is the state of Israel that can defend our people. Which leads to the third thing that Golda and her crowd knew, that we know, which is that American Jewish support can make a real difference. And when she was tasked with raising 25 million and she came home with 50 million, David Ben-Gurion observed that Golda Meir raised the money that made the state of Israel possible. What we do, our resources, our checkbooks, really matters to the state of Israel. And Golda's generation in 1948 helped to create the state of Israel, and is now on us to help sustain the state of Israel. And in that regard, there's two things that we need to keep in mind from two familiar names. One is Micha Goodman sent this podcast, Times of Israel podcast, that came out late this week. And he observed the fight is not between Israel and a local militia. Rather, the fight is between Israel and the Persian Empire. Because it is Iran that is equipping and training and funding terrorists and murderers in Gaza, Hamas, and Hezbollah up north. Israel is fighting a two-front war against the Persian Empire funded by Iran. And here's the second thing. We kind of knew it, we kind of sensed it, we kind of feared it. And then Danny Gordas actually put it out there in words. Israel is fighting for its life. Israel is fighting for its life. Now, the good news is that Israelis get this, and Israelis are coming together. There had been some concern that would reservists, after all the stuff, would they come back? And the answer is yes, and abundantly. Here's what Micha has to say. He said, how many reservists are going to show up? Maybe 70%, maybe 80%. Mathematically, it's impossible, I know. But 150% of reservists have shown up. People who are now in Thailand, Israelis who are now in India, Israelis who are now in London, are doing everything they can to cut. You know how Israelis don't know how to stand in line. Well, we're not standing in line. We're doing everything we can to cut the line, to get on a plane, to come back, to fight for this country, for this nation. So the fighters are getting ready to fight. And by the way, I can't even imagine what that must feel like. Think about going in to Gaza, which is a death trap. Thinking about fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is a death trap. And they're cutting lines to fight. And meanwhile, everybody else is doing their part. Altruism is surging. Micha tells the following story. Altruism is the new Israeli norm, now in the streets of every community in Israel. My girls yesterday, they asked, what can they do? So they got a WhatsApp that there's a family where the husband went to Miluim, to the reserves. They need some help. So my girls made them some cakes, and they go over to the apartment to help, and the apartment is already filled with cakes. Israelis are serving, they're cutting lines to get to the front lines. They're volunteering because Israel is fighting for its life. What about us? What can we do? And that leads to this coming Tuesday night, right here, we're going to be having a concert fundraiser for the state of Israel. What you can do is come and donate generously to the state of Israel. And if your financial circumstances don't permit you to give financial resources now, donate your energy and your time and your love. We know what a world without Israel looks like. We know what hatred directed against the Jewish people without the Jewish people's ability to defend themselves looks like. And it looks today like it looked in medieval France, like it's looked over 2,000 years of pogroms and massacres. It looks like the spilled blood of innocent Jewish men, women, and children. Israel is fighting for its life. Hamas and Hezbollah have Iran. Israel has America, and Israel has us. This is our Golda moment. Will we meet it? Because never again starts now, and never again starts with us.